Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're diving into the when of US government and politics. This module will explore the historical development of American political institutions, key events and movements that have shaped the political landscape. Understanding this historical context is important for grasping how current political structures and practices came to be. Let's start with the history of the Constitution. The US Constitution, drafted in 1787, is the supreme law of the land. It was created in response to the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation, which governed the U.S. after the Revolutionary War. The Articles had several flaws, such as the lack of a strong central government, which led to issues like economic instability and difficulties in collective decision making. Shays' Rebellion in 1786, where armed farmers protested economic injustices, highlighted these weaknesses and spurred the call for a stronger federal government. The Constitutional Convention brought together delegates from the states to create a new framework for governance. Key figures like James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, and Benjamin Franklin played pivotal roles in the drafting process. The resulting Constitution established a federal system with checks and balances between three branches of government: the executive, legislative, and judicial. Moving forward, let's talk about the history of political parties. The US began with no formal political parties, but factions soon emerged. The Federalists, or Federalist Party, led by Alexander Hamilton, favored a strong central government and a robust economic system. In contrast, the Democratic Republicans, led by Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, advocated for states' rights and agrarian, farmer-centered interests. The election of 1800, often referred to as the Revolution of 1800, marked the first peaceful transfer of power between parties in U.S. history. Jefferson's victory over incumbent President John Adams demonstrated the stability and resilience of the new democratic system. The two-party system became more defined in the 1820s with the emergence of the Democratic Party, founded by supporters of Andrew Jackson. And the Whig Party grew out of supporters of the old Federalist Party. They opposed Jackson's policies. The Whig Party eventually dissolved, and most of their supporters then led to the rise of the Republican Party in the 1850s, primarily in opposition to the expansion of slavery into the territories. Speaking of slavery, let's discuss the history of civil rights. The struggle for civil rights has been a central theme in American history. The abolitionist movement in the 19th century, led by figures like Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman, fought to end slavery. The Civil War from 1861 to 65 culminated in the Emancipation Proclamation and the 13th Amendment, which together abolished slavery in the United States. However, the end of slavery did not mean the end of racial discrimination. The Reconstruction era, until 1877, saw the implementation of the 14th and 15th Amendments to the Constitution, which granted citizenship and voting rights to African Americans. Despite these advancements, the late 19th and early 20th centuries were marked by laws called Jim Crow laws that enforced racial segregation and disenfranchised Black Americans. The Civil Rights Movement of the 1950s and 60s sought to dismantle these oppressive systems. Key events like the Brown versus Board of Education Supreme Court decision in 1954, which declared racial segregation in public schools unconstitutional, and the Civil Rights Act of 1964, outlawing discrimination by governments or places of public accommodation, were important moments. Turning points. Influential leaders like Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, and Malcolm X played critical roles in this struggle for equality. Now let's discuss the history of voting eligibility. Initially, voting rights in the U.S. were restricted to white male property owners. Over time, suffrage was expanded through significant legal and social changes. The 15th Amendment, in 1870, prohibited voting discrimination based on race, though it was often circumvented through measures like literacy tests and poll taxes. The 19th Amendment in 1920 was a monumental step forward, granting women the right to vote after decades of activism by suffragists like Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 further protected voting rights by prohibiting racial discrimination in voting and eliminating barriers like literacy tests. The 26th Amendment in 1971 lowered the voting age from 21 to 18, a change driven by arguments that those old enough to be drafted for military service during that time in the Vietnam War should also have the right to vote. These amendments and laws collectively expanded the electorate and made the U.S. more inclusive. Understanding these historical milestones is essential for comprehending the present-day political environment. They illustrate the ongoing struggle for equality and justice and how legal and social reforms can transform society. In conclusion, the history of the U.S. government and politics is rich and complex. From the drafting of the Constitution in 1787 to the expansion of civil rights and voting eligibility, each period has contributed to the development of the current political landscape. Recognizing these historical contexts helps us appreciate the evolution of American democracy and the continuous efforts to improve and maybe perfect it. Next time, we'll explore where are our civil liberties and rights protected? Checks and balances. See you then.